Part 107. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1064. I stayed in the library until evening. She looked up some gambling-related legal case materials, and also deliberately checked the historical origin of Xianghai City, the ups and downs of the domestic gaming industry, and individual-to-business claims cases, among other miscellaneous books. If you can't finish reading in one day, you will record the book numbers one by one, and prepare to log in to the library's online client system after returning home, and then continue reading. The prosecution's strategy should be based on 2 points, one is how evil gambling is, and the other is how miserable Sun Wei's family is. The former evokes common hatred, while the latter evokes sympathy and pity. Therefore, the prosecution will definitely let Sun Wei's wife appear in court and play the bitter card. What about Sun Wei's daughter? No, Sun Wei's daughter is only 5 years old. Cross-examining a 5-year-old girl will definitely arouse the disgust of the jury. I pondered deeply. Based on the protection of minors, she felt that the judge would not allow 5-year-old children to be questioned. So, what cards are left in the prosecution's hand? Just as she was thinking, a shadow was cast in front of her eyes. I looked up and saw Liao Liqin standing in front of her with a blank expression. Liao Liqin also held a few books in her hands, as if she came to the library to look up information. Her eyes fell on a stack of books in I's hand. Seeing that the title of the book contained the word gambling, a cold smile appeared on her face. How does it feel to defend villains? I lowered her eyes, glanced at the book at hand, and then at the book number being recorded in her hand. She was silent for a moment. From the perspective of the public, Murong Cheng is indeed a veritable villain. She raised her head and looked at Liao Liqin again. What about you? Standing in the position of justice must taste good, right? Liao Liqin was slightly taken aback. I also like the side of justice. If possible, I hope that I will always be on the side of justice, I said. In this way, I can condemn and sue the other party without any pressure. If the other party fights back, I can hold high the banner of justice, like a shield of immunity, which can not only block the opponent's attack, but also cover my own cowardice, ugliness, despicableness, all evil deeds. I raised the corners of her lips and smiled coldly, but it's a pity that justice is a luxury, and no one can stand in that position forever. Most people's approach is to imagine a moral high ground, and then gain self-satisfaction while attacking others. Just like you are now. Liao Liqin's face darkened, her lips were tensed. I ignored her, tidied up the books on the table and put them back on the shelf one by one. She is not a saint. She is human. As long as you are human, you will have objects you want to maintain. Even if Murong Cheng is a villain, but they are husband and wife should bear the responsibility together. At this time, a booklet was handed over in front of him. She was slightly surprised and looked up at Liao Liqin. This is the Xianghai Municipal Government's policy approval documents for the legalization of the gaming industry. You can take a look, and it should be helpful. Liao Liqin's expression was still indifferent, and there was even hatred in the indifference. Situ Muzi, I really hate you, but if you lose to those people on the internet, I will hate you even more. I took the booklet, her fingers couldn't help but tighten. Thank you, she whispered, I won't lose. Liao Liqin took a deep look at her, turned and left. I looked at the back of her leaving. She was still so thin, with a straight back, and her steps were firm but heavy. I won't lose, I murmured again. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1065. The next day, I went to the presidential palace to meet several lawyers introduced by Situ Yan. Compared with some barristers who have practiced for decades, Musa lacks experience, especially in claims disputes. Every lawyer gave her good advice and counseled on some precautions, and the rest could only be performed by Musi on the spot. Because this case is very special, under the exaggeration of public opinion, it is not only a simple claim, but also a bloody accusation against the gaming industry. Afterwards, Musi took the plane to Zhonghai, met with the law firm contracted by Muse Group, and held a meeting to discuss countermeasures. The good news is that after a series of public opinion interventions by the Muse Group, the situation on the internet has gradually leveled off. A website posted a poll asking netizens who they want to win the lawsuit. Most people don't care about the facts seriously, and the voting turned into a character competition. This is what the Murong Group hopes to see, because there are no absolutely good people in this world, and everyone has stains. Murong Cheng had his flaws, and so did Sun Wei. It was exposed and posted on the internet for people to judge. Sun Wei was addicted to gambling, domestically abused his wife, and deducted workers' wages. Such a person committed suicide. Why should he pay 100 million yuan? The day before the trial, the vote was firmly at 51% vs 49%. On the day of the trial, it started to rain, and the rain continued. Under the canopy of cloudy clouds, the wind screamed mournfully, like weeping and complaining, blowing from the sea, venting overwhelmingly, like a knot that had been stored for a long time. The rainwater gathered on the car window to form a stream. Musi watched quietly. Murong Cheng put his arms around her waist, closed his eyes and rested his mind, and asked lazily, "Are you nervous?" Musi glanced at him. "It's you who should be nervous, right? If you lose the lawsuit, you'll have to pay him 100 million. When Murong Cheng heard this, his thin lips were slightly raised, as if smiling, his eyes were still closed, and his big hands were stroking her hair leisurely. Although he didn't say a word, Musi seemed to understand his expression, and his thoughts couldn't help but be complicated. With Murong Cheng's haughty temperament, of course he wouldn't take 100 million in his eyes. Whether he wins or loses the lawsuit, he is the same Murong Cheng, but she is different. If you lose, it is tantamount to admitting to the world that you are married to a villain with bad conduct and moral corruption. Probably for every woman, marriage is a matter of dignity. She doesn't want people to feel that she is married to someone who is not human. She knows that Murong Cheng is good, and she is angry on his behalf. One car after another stopped at the gate of the court. Musi got out of the car, and the lawyer team followed behind her, surrounded by an imposing manner. On the contrary, Murong Cheng had the illusion of being compared, and the corners of his lips curled into a smile. The reporters all rushed forward, blocked by bodyguards 2 meters away. "Mr. Mu, are you sure about today's trial? Will MRS Mu defend you personally? Are you going to appeal if you lose? Will you really pay the other party 100 million in compensation?" Murong Cheng stopped in his tracks and said with a smile, "No matter what the outcome of the court trial is, I will respect and accept the court's ruling. Thank you for your concern." After finishing speaking, he took Musi's hand. "Let's go in. Everything is ready in the courtroom, the auditorium is full of people, the cameras are staggered high and low, and everyone is waiting for this confrontation." Musi saw Sun Wei's wife and daughter in the auditorium. Without the deliberate rendering of the news photos, the mother and daughter looked calm and numb. The 5-year-old girl opened her eyes wide, confused and uneasy. She didn't seem to understand why she was taken away. "To here." Murong Cheng whispered to Musi. Bai Jinyan threatened them, that little girl might cry later. Musi glanced at the mother and daughter without a trace, then looked away. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life. Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1066. The judge struck the gavel. Sure enough, the prosecution's first witness was Sun Wei's wife, Luvina. The prosecution lawyer was a little older and looked serious and steady. Murong Cheng said that the lawyer's surname was Fan, and he was Bai Jinyan's queen lawyer, who had exonerated Bai Jinyan countless times. The opposing lawyer said to Luvina, "Ms. Lu, I sympathize with what happened to you. Can you tell me about your husband's situation on the day of the accident?" Luvina replied, "It was Christmas Eve that day. He would go to the casino in Zhonghai City almost every holiday, and he went there that day too. Before he left, he said he would come back for Christmas, and he said he would bring gifts for Zhen Zhen, and then he probably went to the casino at night. Around 12 o'clock, I received a call from the police, who said my husband had died." "Did the police say how your husband died?" the lawyer asked. Luvina nodded. "I told you, I committed suicide by jumping off the building." The lawyer asked again, "Ms. Lu, since you know it was a suicide, on what grounds do you want the Mu Group to pay 100 million yuan? Although it was a suicide, I think my husband's death is inseparably related to the casino under the Mu Group, and the casino should be partially responsible." Luvina said, "He used to be a down-to-earth person, and he has been addicted to casinos since he came into contact with them, lost more and more money, and his personality became more and more irritable and extreme. If it wasn't for gambling, he would not have committed suicide." The lawyer concluded for her, "So you think that gambling changed his temperament and eventually caused his death? And the Mu Group is responsible for this tragedy, right?" "Yes," Luvina said. "I think everyone should be curious about why it is 100 million. The lawyer looked in the direction of the jury. "Can you explain this?" Luvina took a deep breath, with a complex look on her face. "Because of the damage done to me, to my entire family, I asked the court for a compensation of 100 million yuan. After Sun Wei's death, the processing plant he operated was basically in a shutdown stage. We couldn't deliver the goods on time, we couldn't receive the final payment, and the seller wanted to terminate the contract with us, which caused huge economic losses. Besides, I lost my husband, my daughter lost her father, and Zhen Zhen asks me every night why Dad I haven't come back yet. The Muse Group has caused incalculable scars to my family, and they must be responsible for it." "Thank you, I think the court will give a fair verdict." The lawyer nodded, returned to his seat and sat down. Muzi I stood up and asked, "Ms. Lu, how is your relationship with Mr. Sun Wei after marriage?" Luvina frowned. "It's okay." "What does it mean?" Muzi I asked. "Is it good or not?" Luvina pursed her lips, and replied, "Our relationship should be considered okay. We would quarrel occasionally, but this didn't affect our marriage." "Is it just a quarrel?" Muzi picked up a document in her hand and showed it to her. "I have an injury report here, which shows that your nose bridge and ribs were broken due to heavy blows. Ms. Lu, you are a full-time wife, who in the family would beat you up like this?" Luvina pursed her lips tightly and did not answer. The prosecution lawyer stood up. "Objection. Your Honor, this has nothing to do with this case." Muzi I said, "The claim is based on the witness's emotional and family injuries. I think whether the married life is normal should be considered by the court. If the witness's marriage relationship has broken down, then the grounds for the claim cannot be established." The judge pondered, and said, "The objection is invalid, and the defense continues to question." Muzi I looked at Luvina. "Ms. Lu, after years of domestic violence, you still firmly believe that there is no problem with your relationship? Is that so?" Luvina bit her lower lip, her face turned pale. Muzi I asked again, "Ms. Lu, please answer, after being beaten by your husband many times, do you still love him?" At this time, a child's cry suddenly came from the auditorium. Sun Wei's 5-year-old daughter cried loudly, "You are a bad person. You are not allowed to bully my mother. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again." Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1067. Ah, I want daddy. I want mommy. Mommy. The child cried. The audience was in an uproar. The cries of children filled the entire courtroom. The jury members cast strange glances. The judge kept hitting the gavel and shouted over and over again, "Silence! Silence!" However, the harshness of the judge made the child lose control of his emotions even more, crying heartbreakingly. Musi only felt that the crying was pulling her heart, that the hammer was hitting her brain, and the surrounding noises rushed into her ears. Her thoughts were confused, only buzzing sound remained. On the witness stand, Luvina's eyes were flushed, and she wanted to go over to coax the child several times, but finally held back with clenched fists, and tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. It wasn't until a relative of the Sun family carried the child out of the court that order was finally restored, but the faces of the jury members obviously showed more sympathy and intolerance. Musi stood quietly on the spot, looking at the faces, with subtle changes in expression, like condemnation, like criticism. She was in a daze. Zizi, Murong Cheng gently held her hand. Musi regained consciousness and looked at him. Murong Cheng asked, "Do you need to rest?" Musi shook her head lightly. She looked at Luvina, and her mood gradually calmed down. This is not a pure claim case. If she leaves the impression of bullying orphans and widows in front of the public, it will make people feel that she is domineering. Even if she wins the lawsuit, it is tantamount to losing. Musi was deep in thought, and approached Luvina slowly. "Ms. Lu, were you sad when you heard the news of your husband's death?" Musi continued to ask. Luvina said, "Yes, I am very sad." "Are you crying?" "Yes." "You must be very sad," Musi said. "I once experienced the death of a family member. I felt very difficult at that time. I couldn't hear what other people said to me. I couldn't even remember to drink water and eat. Later, my stomach hurt. When I got up, I realized that I hadn't eaten all day." "Ms. Lu, did you eat on Christmas Day?" Luvina frowned and said, "Miss Lawyer, I have a child. If I just keep on being sad, who will take care of my child?" Musi said, "Sorry, I'm a lawyer, I should be the one asking you questions, you just need to answer." Luvina's complexion became ugly, bit her lip, and replied, "I ate, the meal I ate with the child, can't make the child hungry." The jury members also showed concern, thinking that Musi was a bit picky. "Can you tell me what you ate?" Musi asked. Luvina frowned even tighter. She was very resistant to Musi's question and was not willing to answer at all. "Objection," the prosecution lawyer stood up again. "Your Honor, the defense has been pestering some meaningless questions. Whether it is meaningful or not should be judged by the jury." Musi immediately retorted, "Your Honor, the fact that the witness is unwilling to answer questions is because she prepared roast turkey, steak, pigeon soup, and cream cake at home that day. For a family that has just lost a loved one, it's obviously very, very rich." "It's Christmas," the prosecution lawyer shouted, "maybe the ingredients were prepared before." "Steak is indeed an ingredient purchased in advance, but turkey and butter cake were bought on Christmas Day." Musi showed the judge a shopping list. "Not only that, Ms. Lu also bought new clothes and new toys for her daughter. I also bought a new set of brand name cosmetics." Obviously, when she found that she finally got rid of the man who beat her, she couldn't help but want to celebrate. Everyone was stunned and looked at the witness stand. Musi took a deep breath and said, "Sun Wei's death did not cause any harm to her, so it is untenable to claim compensation based on this. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again." Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1068. Since when can shopping and eating food be used as the criteria for judging whether a person is sad? The prosecution lawyer said angrily. "Everyone expresses sadness in different ways. When you are extremely sad, it is not impossible to consume blindly. Maybe you are right, but I think it is necessary to let the jury know whether it is blind consumption or not. It should also be judged by the jury, Musei replied. Unwilling to hang on to this point for too long, the judge asked, "Are there any other witnesses for the prosecution?" The lawyer replied, "No. Since the facts of the case are clear and both parties have no objections, the closing statement will start directly in 1 hour, and the court is now adjourned." The judge struck the gavel, ending a brief dispute. It is an indisputable fact that Sun Wei jumped to his death from the 9th floor of the casino. There is no need to ask more witnesses. The focus of the dispute now is the determination of responsibility. How to determine the responsibility depends on the expression of the closing statement. As soon as they went out, there was another swarm of reporters. Murong took Musei and went to the lounge with the legal team. Madam's questioning just now worked very well. It made the jury feel distrustful of Sun Wei's wife, and we have an advantage. But that child is a bit tricky. The other party obviously deliberately let Sun Wei's daughter sit in the gallery to gain sympathy. People don't want to embarrass a child. The other party will definitely emphasize the negative impact of gambling in his closing statement, which will arouse the jury's resentment towards the Muse group. We need to be prepared. Where's the stat sheet for the charitable fund? Can use this as a repost. The materials were organized in an orderly manner and passed to Musei. Musei lowered her eyes to look at the documents, raised her head after a while and said, "You don't need to appear in court during the closing statement." Everyone looked at each other in blank dismay. "Did you find out?" The other party only had one lawyer present, neither an assistant nor an assistant lawyer, Musei said slowly. "The lawyer is an old man, plus a woman and a child. Weak, but on our side, a group of strong people are watching." Musei looked at the crowd. "I don't want to leave the impression that there is a big difference between the strong and the weak in front of the jury, so you don't have to attend for a while. No matter what the final result is, I am very grateful for everyone's hard work and help these days. All of you here are lawyers, so they naturally understand some subtle tricks in court trials. Mass psychology will habitually favor the disadvantaged. For example, if an old man riding a tricycle scratches a luxury car, people will not consider the interests of the owner of the luxury car, but subconsciously feel that the old man is too pitiful. Even if the old man did make a mistake, pity will cover up his mistake. People will think, he didn't do it on purpose. How pitiful it is to ride three wheels to make a living at such an old age. If it weren't for the hardships of life, he could enjoy his old age at home. He was already suffering, and now he scratched someone's car. How should I live the days to come?" As for the owner of the luxury car, people will only think, "You are so rich, so don't worry about it." It's not that this kind of mentality is bad. In fact, this kind of pity for the weak is a kind of compassion. If everyone in the society loves the weak, it will undoubtedly be very harmonious. But once this kind of psychology is incited and used as a weapon in court, it will change. The lawyers will be aware of this, so there is no objection, and they leave the lounge one after another. After everyone left, Musei let out a soft breath, tilted her head and rested on Murong Cheng's shoulder. "Do you want to sleep for a while?" Murong Cheng asked her. Musei hummed in a low voice. Murong Cheng hugged her into his arms and kissed her. "Go to sleep. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life. Mu Shao, your wife is born again." Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1069. When the trial was held again, Sun Wei's wife, Luvina, sat next to the lawyer with her daughter Zhen Zhen in her arms. The eye sockets of both mother and daughter were red, as if they had cried hard. The haggard look on Luvina's face is obvious, the hair on the sideburns is scattered, and the lips are dull in color. Her daughter hugs her neck tightly, and the uneasiness in her eyes makes people feel distressed. It's hard not to sympathize with them. The lawyer noticed that there was only Muzi left as the defense lawyer. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He looked at Muzi's calm expression all the time. It was difficult to catch the information, and he was inexplicably uneasy. He knew that the president's daughter was a beautiful woman-in-law, but he was not bad either. He had been in the industry for decades, and his subordinates rarely failed. Moreover, this case had a great advantage for him. As long as he can convince the jury to his side, the case is a sure win. The judge reminded both the prosecution and the defense to begin their closing arguments. Start with the prosecution. The lawyer stood up and walked step by step before the jury. When I first took over this case, I was very hesitant. The lawyer began his statement in a low voice. We all know that Sun Wei committed suicide, which means that he climbed up that window by himself, jumped off the 9th floor by himself, and chose to die by himself. He can't blame anyone else. Why should we claim compensation? The lawyer pointed to Luvina and her child, but when I saw them, I knew I couldn't refuse, even if the other party was the most powerful person in Xianghai City, even if the other party was the president's son-in-law. Mother and daughter, fight for their due interests. The first step is to point out the opposition between strength and weakness. Muzi wrote it down on the paper. The inquiry just now is outrageous. In order to evade responsibility, the defense lawyer kept asking this poor woman what she ate and bought. What does this mean? Does it have to cry to the heart to show her sadness and pain? The lawyer looked at the members of the jury with a solemn expression, and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, the reality is not a TV series. The reality is that her daughter kept asking why Dad didn't come back. Did Dad buy gifts? Where is Dad? This home has to be supported. So she goes shopping, buys clothes, buys toys, pretends it's all a present from her husband, and tells her daughter that Daddy won't be coming back for a while, but lo and behold, Daddy still loves you and he bought you your last favorite dress, favorite toy, cake, the annual Christmas. Father is absent, but mother does not want to let her daughter regret, she just wants her daughter to spend Christmas happily." There were tears in the eyes of some people in the gallery. The jury was also moved. The lawyer took a deep breath and said painfully, "This is the real reality. Everyone, life is about to crush this woman, and the defense lawyer's torture is undoubtedly adding salt to the wound. The second step is to explain the unreasonable testimony. Every one of us is very clear about what gambling is. It lures people to degenerate and drives them to commit crimes. Even though our media and our government have repeatedly publicized the bad effects of gambling, there are still countless people flocking to it. I don't know how you feel about this, but I can't stand it anymore." The lawyer pointed to Murong Cheng. "Did you see that man? No matter how well dressed and handsome he looks, it can't conceal the fact that the casino he runs is extracting people's hard-earned money all the time. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is made of the flesh and blood of disciples. Those things in the casino, such as slot machines, baccarat, roulette, stud, etc., are all tools for him to make money. The seemingly fair gambling game has carefully designed the winning and losing odds, which is tantamount to fraud. However, such fraud exists in our society all the time. What should we do? Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again." Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1070. Watching our children, our brothers and sisters, and even our friends, be deluded and seduced and sit back and do nothing. Watch the crime rate in the city we live in rise day by day and sit back and watch. Everyone. It's time to say no to gambling. It's time to take a head-on blow to the dirty and sinful gambling industry. Sun Wei didn't die by suicide, he died by the poison of the casino. He and his family were devastated in this tragedy. Someone has to pay for this. The prosecution lawyer was impassioned and vocal. There was excitement on people's faces. This is the worst situation. When a lawyer mobilizes the emotions of the audience, the victory is not far away. Muzi silently continued to write on the paper. The third step is to arouse the resonance of all. It is ironic that the best lawyers often do not come from those well-known law firms, but have been with criminals for a long time. Because of this kind of experience, each of their lawsuits is particularly difficult, and every court confrontation is fierce, with their lives hanging by a thread. Adversity is the best catalyst for human growth. Muzi stood up slowly. Where should she begin? Gambling leads people to commit crimes, gambling makes people degenerate, and gambling breaks countless families. Musa said slowly, I also hate gambling, but I want everyone to pay attention to one thing. The casino under the Zhonghai Murong Group is legal and compliant. In other words, the operation of casinos is allowed and supported by the local government. Since the opposing lawyer believes that the casino took Sun Wei's life, should the government that allowed the casino also be partially responsible? Muzi's eyes swept over the faces of the jury members one by one. Are you outraged? Why do local governments condone the existence of casinos? Just because of the huge profits in this industry, can they ignore the harm of the gambling industry and the safety of people's livelihood? Muzi paused for a while and continued, yes, it's because of huge profits. Do you know the Sky City Casino in New Zealand? According to the data released by the Ministry of the Interior of New Zealand, nearly 80% of the income of New Zealand's gaming industry comes in the form of bonuses and charitable grants returned to New Zealand residents. In addition to the tax paid, the casino donates more than 3 million New Zealand dollars to social charitable organizations every year. The casinos under the MU Group have always paid 40% of the gross income of the casinos to the government as taxes, creating more than 10 billion fiscal revenue for the government every year, and this year, the MU Group established a charitable foundation to pay 40% after the gross income. Half of the profit must be used for charity. We put homes into homes for the homeless, we put schools into schools for out-of-school children, and we put medicines in place for the frail and elderly. And the huge amount of tax we pay is used to build cities, build high-rise buildings, repair bridges and roads, fill social relief funds, and improve various municipal constructions. Muzi looked at the strange faces in front of her, and said in a steady but forceful tone, everyone, being rich is not a crime. I don't deny the social harm that gambling brings, but we can't ignore it either. A large number of job opportunities will reduce the pressure of unemployment and promote the development of tourism. How many industries does the seemingly sinful casino support? Waiters, bartenders, song and dance actors, magicians, retail, catering, hotels, pawn credit. This is a complete system of tourism and service industry. The value created by this part for the city is far greater than the casino itself. Is it fair for us to be indifferent when it shows its advantages, but to criticize it when it reveals its disadvantages? Having said this, Muzi adjusted her breathing slightly, and turned her head to look at Luvina and her daughter. I am deeply sympathetic to Ms. Liu's experience, but I cannot agree with the accusation of the other lawyer. Sun Wei is an adult with the ability to act independently. His death is definitely not persecution by the casino. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1071. Muzi looked at the jury members. If we get to the bottom of it, Sun Wei's death, in fact, he died in this impetuous society. Some people speculate in stocks and lose their fortunes, and some people play futures and end up bankrupt and commit suicide. Such things happen endlessly in society, don't they? Have we made the stock market lose money? Did you find the futures company to claim? We don't, because the courts are not the place to cure society's ills, and there's only one thing to consider here. Is the MU Group responsible for Sun Wei's suicide? There is a notice board hanging at the entrance of every casino in Zhonghai City, which reads, Gambling is impossible to win, bet lightly for pleasure, play with spare money, and keep entertaining. The harmfulness of gambling never lies in the gambling itself, but in the gambler's addiction and loss of control. Only when the gambler's loss exceeds his economic ability, will the social harmfulness occur. If you also agree with this statement, you can't think that the Muse Group is guilty because it operates a casino, and you can't think it's guilty because the casino makes huge profits. This case is not about the wealth and power of the Muse Group, but about the relationship of responsibility. Sun Wei's suicide was a voluntary act. It has nothing to do with the casino or the Muse Group. I hope you can seriously think about this issue after returning to the jury room. After Muse I finished speaking, she let out a soft breath. She withdrew her gaze, no longer looking at the expressions of the jury members, and turned back to her seat. When she was about to sit down, Muse I pursed her lips and said again, "I once knew a prosecutor who told me." Before taking part in the judicial assessment, she thought that the law was justice, making rules to balance society. Then she became a prosecutor, and found that she was justice, and she could decide whether a criminal should go to jail with one word. Later, she thought that the law was just it is used to limit people like her who pretend to be righteous. The heart of justice is precious, but without legal restrictions, justice will become violence. Muse I sat down and finished her speech. The whole place was silent, and there was no sound. She didn't know whether the silence was good or not. The judge called the jury into the jury room for discussion. There is usually no time limit for discussion. If the 12 members reach an agreement quickly, the result will come out immediately. But if one of the 12 members disagrees with the others, the discussion will continue until a unified result is reached. This time is half an hour faster, and if it is slower, half a month is not impossible. Muse I and Murong Chen waited for news in the lounge as usual. I don't know if the jury members were arguing fiercely. The whole afternoon passed, and there was no news until the evening. Muse I was tired and anxious. If we can't wait for the result today, it means that this matter will be difficult, and public opinion will continue to ferment. Just when she thought the result would not come out today, the court staff pushed open the door of the lounge. The jury has come out with the result. Muse I took a deep breath and looked at Murong Chen. Murong Chen took Muse I's hand and found that her palm was wet. He shrank his heart, only felt distressed, gently hugged her into his arms, and stroked her back silently, as if he was comforting and giving support. The two returned to court again. The jury declared its verdict. The first complaint is whether the casino can be regarded as the cause of Sun Wei's death. We judge that it is not. The second complaint is whether the casino needs to make reasonable compensation to the family of the deceased. We judge that it does not. Suddenly, Muse I felt relieved. The judge tapped the gavel, the court ruled in favor of the defendant, the jury was dismissed, and the court thanked you for your work. Adjourned. There was a lot of voices around, Muse's brain was buzzing chaotically, and she was still in a trance. She won? Murong Chen doesn't need to pay compensation? No one will call them a black-hearted couple anymore? Tears were caught off guard and rolled down. It turned out that she didn't care, she cared a lot. She cares all the time. Zizi, Murong Chen hugged her tightly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1073. When the trial was over, they walked out of the courtroom, where reporters swarmed outside. Mrs. Mu. How do you feel about winning this lawsuit? Will this victory have any impact on the development of Muse Group in the future? Mr. Mu, please tell me. Is today's victory in your expectation? One question after another came one after another, surrounded by bodyguards, Murong Cheng led Mu Zi straight to the car. Mu Zi stopped. I hope. Mu Zi replied to the reporter's question just now, I hope that the public can view the gaming industry more objectively, and then, for those young people whose values have not yet formed, I want to remind them not to accept the gambling industry just because the casino won the lawsuit. Believe that gambling is right. Indulging in gambling will ruin your future and become a negative energy and unstable factor in society. This is what we must be vigilant about. The reporter was ecstatic. He didn't expect that Mu Zi would really answer his question, and immediately extended the microphone even longer. Mrs. Mu, you mentioned youth education. Will casinos make any adjustments in this regard in the future? Will they control the development of the industry because of the harm of gambling? Our casinos have always refused entry to minors under the age of 18. Mu Zi replied solemnly, our customer orientation has always been the rich and the middle class, guiding them to spend more in the surrounding areas. In terms of the service industry, it will drive the development of social employment and the service industry. So do you think that the casinos under the Muse Group are more beneficial to society than harmful? The reporter asked again. This is a social problem, and there is no way to compare it. Muse's slightly immature face was serious, not only in the Zhonghai casino, but in fact overseas, Monaco, Atlantic City, Las Vegas. These global famous casinos also hope to allow foreigners to become the main force of consumption in the gaming industry in their country, so as to reduce the negative impact of gambling on the domestic society. Overseas gamblers are also the largest customer group of Zhonghai Casino. In the future, we will focus on the gambling industry to develop tourism, shopping, and vacation industries in Zhonghai. Mu Zi said a lot. The reporter aimed at Murong Cheng. Mr. Mu, do you have anything to say about the future development of the Mu Group? Murong Cheng smiled, and only said one sentence, all you have to do is listen to your wife. Everyone laughed. Mu Zi also showed a shy smile. The couple stood by the car and asked reporters to take a few group photos before finally getting into the car. Murong Cheng was in a great mood, and held Mu Zi in his arms. Madam, it's really good to speak publicly, our casino, our customer orientation. Mu Zi blushed and thumped him, your casino, your customer positioning. Murong Cheng smiled and grabbed her small fist, held it to his mouth and kissed, it's all yours. After winning the lawsuit, both of them are in a good mood. After returning home, Murong Cheng personally cooked a few dishes, and Mu Zi ate them with gusto. She likes this. Compared to the servant cooking, the food cooked by Murong Cheng is more in her heart, it will make her feel like home. Although Murong Cheng's culinary skills are mediocre, only a few French dishes that he has specially learned can be cooked well. Is it delicious? Murong Cheng asked. Mu Zi frowned and nodded. Murong Cheng asked her with a smile, do you know why it's delicious? Mu Zi thought of his shameless traits, her bright eyes flashed with a sly gleam, and she asked, because there is your love in it. Murong Cheng laughed loudly, and reached out to pinch her face, because you love me. Even if the food is burnt, you still think it's delicious. Mu Zi chewed carefully, it seemed that it really tasted like paste. You man. Mu Zi bit her lip and glared at him. At this moment, Murong Cheng's cell phone rang. He answered the phone with a calm expression. Well, just send it away, don't let Baijinyan's people find out. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1074. After a few words, Murong Cheng hung up the phone. Mu Zi usually wouldn't ask him about his business affairs, but when he heard Baijinyan's name just now, he couldn't help but ask, what happened? Baijinyan's people threatened Luvina. Murong Cheng told Mu Zi, if the lawsuit wins, Luvina will get 100 million compensation for nothing. If the lawsuit is lost, Baijinyan's people will force her to hang herself. Mu Zi's face immediately turned pale. If Luvina committed suicide after the trial, then, then even if Murong Cheng wins the lawsuit, it will be meaningless. People would only think that Murong Cheng forced the Sun family couple to death, and that the advantage that Mu Ziyi had just gained would be wiped away by Luvina's death. Bai Jinyan was so devastated. Mu Ziyi was so angry that she clenched her fists, her nails digging deep into her flesh. Even the murderers she had come into contact with before wouldn't take human life as a trifle like Bai Jinyan. Don't worry, the mother and daughter are fine. Murong Cheng gently held her hand and patted it. Wang Zhan sent someone to send them to another city, and they will come back after the limelight is over. Bai Jinyan has to worry about it. There are too many things to do, and it is impossible to keep an eye on them. Mu Ziyi nodded. Murong Cheng said that they are fine, so they will be fine. Mu Ziyi trusted Murong Cheng very much, but when he thought of Bai Jinyan's cruelty, he still couldn't calm down, and asked, Bai Jinyan didn't succeed this time, will he stop here? Will he use other tricks to deal with you? Murong Cheng shook his head. Bai Jinyan is particularly cautious in his actions. Unless he has a great chance of winning, he will not make a move easily. This time he loses, he should be dormant for a long time. As he spoke, his voice paused, and he continued, besides, I have cut off his source of income. Even if he hates me so much now, the top priority should be to find other ways to do business as soon as possible. There is no point in competing with me all the time. Bai Jinyan is not a person who acts on his own will. Drug dealers are mercenary. Bai Jinyan had already spent a lot of manpower and financial resources in order to get revenge on Murong Cheng, but he didn't get the desired result. He should withdraw immediately and stop the loss instead of continuing to compete. As for the future, when Bai Jinyan is busy making money and dealing with Interpol, he may not have the extra energy to take revenge on Murong Cheng. In the final analysis, between Bai Jinyan and Murong Cheng, there are only conflicts of interests, not bloody enmity. If Bai Jinyan makes a comeback, then it is only possible that some people are instigating. These, Murong Cheng did not tell Mu Ziyi. Mu Ziyi already had a psychological shadow on Mu Zhenning, and Murong Cheng didn't want her to live in panic. The person Mu Zhenning, the word Mu Zhenning, should completely disappear from Mu Ziyi's life. The entire trial of this lawsuit was open to the public. No matter the prosecution or the defense, they undoubtedly performed extremely well. Once it was exposed on the internet, it immediately aroused heated discussions among the people. The out-of-control public opinion gradually returned to rationality, and there were fewer and fewer abuses and slanders. Seeing this change, Mu Ziyi's friends were all happy for Mu Ziyi, and Sidu Yan from the presidential palace was also greatly relieved. Liao Liqin also pays attention to the dynamics on the internet. She found a video of the trial. The trial process was extremely boring and long, but Liao Liqin still watched it from beginning to end. Seeing the moment when the judge announced that Mu Ziyi had won the case, for some reason, Liao Liqin suddenly wanted to cry. The room was empty, she sat alone weeping, her heart was full of regret and pain. She turned out a photo of her husband, held it in her hand and murmured, "Look, she's made it through, as long as she gets through it, she'll be fine of."